Okay, in this video what we're going to do is show how to take your table of records and turn each record into a point on the map. We need to have previously imported the table, which is covered in a previous video, and then we're in a position ready to take it through two steps to show it on the map. Step one is to geocode the table, which is to check all the contents, and out of the contents such as postcode or postcode plus suburb, sometimes GPS coordinates, then we produce a position on the map, and then that record is able to be displayed. Geocoding process has possibilities for error depending on the content that is supplied, and we go through a process of possibly error correcting before then moving on to going and seeing our records placed on the map. Alright, so all we need to do is to, after the import, is to go up to the main menu, go Table, Geocode, Table Ready for Points, and we pick the table that we've imported. And we've only got one table in this installation, so we'll just pick that one, and then we press Geocode. In this example, there are in the number of records in that table, and there are 12 warnings placed in the report file that gives, and the same information is available in the clipboard, which you can just paste into a document. And you may or may not see these warnings depending on the process, how it finds the content of your data. This particular table, when we imported it, we declared that we had a suburb column. Therefore, this process knows to match up postcode and suburb columns, and with that pair is able to produce a more precise location compared to just using postcode alone. Right? So if we could ignore these warnings and quite happily use the rest of the table as points. The warnings could produce several possibilities of error. One is that postcode and suburb may not be recognized, but postcode might, in which case it uses a degraded precision. And if it's completely invalid record, then that record doesn't get displayed on the map at all. We could accept that and continue through, or we could go through and fix up our data, again importing it and geocoding until such time as we have no errors. We'll have an examination of this particular report file though, which is able to be put into an open document we have here. So we'll just paste that in. Goes through and produces the record number from your table and the postcode and suburb as it sees it, and then it gives reasonable suggestions for what you might do to correct it. In which case we can see that in this second error, record 194, we have a spelling mistake. So we've got two T's in mount. It's actually suggesting that you might use that spelling. So it will be very easy to go back to our table and change that back to one T like it should. Further down, here's another example, record 387 from our table, 3041 in Essendon. Says it wasn't found, but checked the name Essendon and saw that it could be right if it was 3040. It's pretty close to that, so we suspect that maybe there was just an error in the data entry side of things. So if we went back and changed the 3041 to 3040, it would all be correct and pass through. And for the rest of the records, we can then work out that we say, okay, we got East Doncaster instead of Doncaster East. And this kind of suggestion over here is a pretty good hint as to what you need to do to change your data to make it valid. So pretty easy, 12 records placed in that report file, and we can go backwards and forwards until we're happy with it. We can press OK on that. Option here is to show them points on the map, which you could just obviously just say yes. We won't do that. We'll just say no for now, but I'll show you how at any stage, once you've gone through the geocoding process, it produces another file that's the same as the source table name, but recognized as having gone through the geocoding process. And so when we go up to this menu option here, we want to point add from table. What appears is the list of geocoded tables only, and we can pick on any one. Again, we've just got one in our example, and we can then display them as stack display or random scatter if we've got any coincident points. What that means is that if you suspect or have multiple records at the same location, how you want that handled. A stacked display will mean that it will place them in a vertical column. The first record at a location will establish the center point on the map, and then second and subsequent records at that same location will then be placed visually above it one by one until such a time as there are no more in that particular location. A random scatter means that it will be centered around that point, and the rest will be just tightly clustered around that. Not a particularly useful display for most applications, but it's available there as an option. But we'll just take the default and do a stacked display, and we'll say add now. And it's giving us another pop-up prompt telling us that there are 215 groups in this particular table, which means that 215 locations, it found multiple records at the same location. And again, that's available in the document that we can then open should we wish. And we can see that as we go to this document, we have a group number, which just is ascending order, group 1, group 2, and a record number of our source table. And we can see that in this case they're all geocoded to Penrith 2750, which all looks correct. And again, we could just have a pass through our data, and they all describe those kinds of addresses, so that looks to be okay. And a second group and so forth. This is again a validation process if we want to go through it and just double check that our source content is correct and all the output is as expected. So we just press OK and acknowledge that. We don't have to do anything with it if we don't want to. And then press OK, and then the map will zoom to cover the extent of that data. It uses the default symbol that's defined at the moment. That default symbol is edit options, and this entry here, point symbol, and you can pick on whatever you want, in which case, as you can see, we've got this pink triangle symbol number 22 as our current default symbol, so therefore that's what it uses for display all of the locations. So we'll zoom in to an area. We can see the stack display quite clearly as we zoom in and get more detail. We can see that we have our different source locations. Again, we've got the base being the first record at that particular location, then any subsequent records are then stacked visually. This stacking is always just done in a visual separation. It's independent of map scale, so as we zoom in and zoom out, that stacking remains the same. But of course, the base location will vary with the map scale and map zoom. As we roam the mouse over, we can get back to our source records, and we see that again how our content is being correctly geocoded, and this is another check if you wish to do it. And we can change that display. If we change our mind, we go back to points, show, group, and we can group it as random clusters, which means that around the original point and any subsequent points is just moved around a little bit. Again, that makes it very hard if you've got a large number of points to see exactly what's going on, but it gives you an alternate display. And we can then change that back. We can say show the group as a stacked display. So we're back to this again. There's another option we could use to then subsequently go through and to change the points to be according to the content of a table. We might have a status or a type column, A, B, or C, or something like that, and we can filter and change the symbols accordingly. That will be covered in another video, but that's all you need to do to take your table through the geocoding process and display them on the map.